Hi guys, in this video I'd like to go over the May U.S. home sales report that came out today. This is a report that comes out monthly and it gives us insight into what's happening in the housing sector, which is a big part of the overall macroeconomy for many reasons, but mainly because the majority of Americans' wealth is actually held in the housing sector. I mean, think about it. If somebody bought a home years ago for $200,000, and now that home is worth $500,000 because the housing market has improved, then they have $300,000 in additional wealth. And for the average American, that's where they've made their wealth. In that respect, what we see is housing markets fluctuate based on the activity in those markets. For example, if you have a very robust housing market where you have a lot of people buying homes, then you're likely to see home prices go up and Americans will see more wealth in their home ownership. And that has an interesting effect. It causes Americans, when they feel wealthier, to go out and spend more. We call that a wealth effect. And that can actually stimulate the larger economy. Contrast that with another possibility. Let's say we have a stagnant housing sector where not a lot of people are buying homes. Maybe prices are going down, and that's lowering Americans' wealth in housing. Well, that means they're going to have a wealth effect, but it's going to be a negative wealth effect. They're not going to want to spend money now because they feel like they have less to spend, and that can have effects on the overall economy when people stop spending. So the housing market is a very important kind of organ in the larger economy. It drives the larger economy, like some other markets do, in ways that we have to be aware of. And this report gives us a sense of what's happening. So for this report, it says May U.S. home sales dropped 9.7% as the pandemic kept shoppers indoors. Well, that makes sense because we have COVID, we have the lockdown, people are not out shopping, and a home is something people will buy, so they're not going to be shopping for homes. You know, I worked in real estate for years, and one of the ways that you typically market real estate is an open house. Well, it's very hard to hold an open house when people are locked down and where you can't have social gatherings and you can't really get people to come and see it. Who would want to buy a home without seeing it first? So it's very difficult to hold open houses, very difficult for people to get out there and see homes, and that's probably affecting home sales. Now, notice here it says existing home sales fell to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 3.91 million. What does that mean? Well, we're focused on existing homes in this report, meaning homes that are not new. Okay? New construction and the sales that correspond to those homes is a separate report. Existing homes focuses on non-new construction, which makes up the majority of housing in the U.S. I mean, just look at a city like San Diego. I mean, how many homes are existing and how many homes are new? The vast majority of San Diego homes are existing homes. And that's true for the majority of the country. It also says the sales fell to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 3.91 million. Seasonally adjusted means that we just remove the seasonal factors that would influence sales. That allows us to focus on other non-seasonal factors that would be affecting housing sales. It also says annual rate of 3.91 million. Well, whenever you have an annual rate, that means that you've taken a monthly or a quarterly or a semi-annual number and multiplied it to convert it to an annual number. So for example, this report comes out monthly. Therefore, to annualize a monthly number, we would multiply it by 12, right? Because there's 12 months in a year. So this says it's an annual rate of 3.91 million. Well, that means we took the May sales numbers for existing homes and multiplied them by 12 to get an annual number. Okay? That means that if you wanted the monthly number, you would just take 3.91 million and divide that by 12. Regardless, we like to state numbers in an annual way. That way, whether we're looking at monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, or annual, we can compare them to each other. Okay, so just understand what that means. I want to refer you to another site that helps us look at these types of reports in a kind of intertemporal way. That means across time. And the site I'm going to refer you to is Trading Economics. There's other ones. But Trading Economics takes data from the different sources, and they look at how it changes over time. So they're just collecting the data that comes out and making it presentable in a way that's easier to analyze. And so, for example, this is the existing home sales report, and it defaults to 1 year, but we can look at 5 years, we can look at 10 years, we can look at 25, we can go back as far as it'll go, back to 1970 here. Let's go back to 1 year for a minute. Notice that this is updated with today's numbers. So we had in our Wall Street Journal report that there was 3.91 million homes sold in May, again, annualized number. When we go to Trading Economics, 3.91 or 3,910,000. All right, and now we can see how it's changed. So in April, we had 4,330,000. Well, that decrease there, if you do the calculation, is 9.7%. So that's where they got that, 9.7%. But look at how it's changed. So back prior to our COVID lockdown, we actually saw numbers that were above 5 million. And then this is February, this is March. And then in March, we locked down the economy, and notice it immediately drops off for April and then May. Okay. That gives us insight into what happened. We can look at these timelines and say, well, what changed here? What changed here? And we know what that is. So likely this drop is a consequence of the COVID lockdowns. Okay. There's a lot of things that can influence existing home sales, but these timelines allow us to focus in on what might be the culprit. The timeline goes back further, and if we go back 5 years, you notice we still don't have numbers that low. We're below 4 million annualized monthly home sales. If we go 10 years, well, here we actually do see a lower number. So if you go back, you got to go all the way back to, it looks like 2010 to see figures similar. If you go back 25 years. This here, for those of you that have heard of the housing bust, this was the housing bust. So notice in the housing bust, we went from 2005, we had over 7 million annualized home sales in that month here, and it just collapsed all the way down to a low by 2010 of, looks like, well below 4 million. So we're almost to the depths of what we saw in the housing bust. Okay? That housing bust came with what we also call the Great Recession. So we're seeing existing home sales that are analogous to the Great Recession. So we said that COVID is the likely cause. That's not to suggest, however, that there aren't other factors at play here. One factor that influences housing is interest rates. Interest rates are very important when it comes to buying a home because people borrow money. Most people borrow money to buy a home. The typical home buyer puts 20% of the purchase price down and then finances 80%. So if you buy a $500,000 home, there's a good chance that you're putting $100,000 down and financing $400,000. Well, that $400,000 that you finance is going to require you pay interest every month. So the higher the interest rate, the more the monthly payment's going to be, and the less people are going to be able to afford a home. The lower the interest rate, the more people are going to be able to afford a home. And interest rates are at almost historic lows, so that's probably driving housing sales, not actually causing a drop. If anything, the low interest rates are mitigating this decrease that we're seeing in home sales. I think it says in the article here that interest rates, 30-year fixed rate mortgage fell to 3.13% last week. And we can actually look at mortgage rates and how they've changed over time. I mean, look at this, mortgage rates are 3.3%. I mean, these are some of the lowest rates we've had in years. Go back 5 years, right? I mean, the lowest in 5 years, go back 10 years. The lowest in 10 years, go back 25 years. Go back all the way from the early 90s, and we have the lowest rates. So low interest rates would be helping the market for housing because it would make those payments lower for financing a home. So that's not a culprit, but we always look at interest rates as a potential factor. The other factor is the uncertainty in the economy, confidence, we might say, about the future. Right now, because of COVID and because of the commensurate contraction we've seen in the economy, the higher unemployment and other factors, people are uncertain about their future. They're scared about going out, taking on a lot of big purchases right now. So there's a very good chance that the combination of COVID itself and the lockdown, coupled with the uncertainty about future employment and the economy, are the reason we're seeing this large drop. Okay, last thing I want to mention is when we look at these indicators, they help us understand the larger economy, but they're not all inclusive. So looking at U.S. home sales, that's one indicator that helps us diagnose the larger economy. It's important because, as I said, housing sales is a big influencer on the larger economy, but it's only one indicator. Just as when you go to the doctor, right, they don't just take your blood pressure and diagnose you, right? They take your blood pressure, they do a blood panel, they do x-rays, they take your temperature. I mean, they do all sorts of diagnostic assessments. This is one diagnostic assessment that we have to put in the context of many others to assess the health of the larger economy. So the fact that home sales drop doesn't in and of itself mean that the economy is in trouble. It just means that that indicator suggests that there's a little bit more concern than otherwise would be the case. All right, guys, if you have questions, let me know. Thanks.